I'm happy to welcome back friend of the show, Tom Nichols. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic and just a man about town. Also, video gamer Tom Nichols. Great to see you.
You too, Matt. And yes,
hey,
gamer extraordinaire.
Gamer extraordinaire. I want to start with the shakeup yesterday. It was announced that Mike Waltz would be no longer be the national security advisor. We thought maybe he was being fired for accidentally including your boss on a Signal chat. Instead, he's been moved to UN ambassador to the UN. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio's in charge of pretty much everything now. He's Secretary of State, acting national security advisor, and archivist that we know of. What do you make of this shakeup, Tom Nichols?
Well, a couple of things. First, in Trump world, being exiled to New York is a demotion, but I can't, thinking about how the White House is such a hot mess, Mike Waltz lands in a pretty decent place. I mean, he gets to go, hang on the, in Midtown and go to diplomatic parties. But there's no doubt that this was to get him out. Although interesting that Trump decided to give him that soft landing because, Mike Waltz gave up a safe House seat. And I think that the other thing that's really striking about this, because you brought up the Signal chat, it's almost worse that people in Trump world are saying, no, it really wasn't that much about Signal. He was doomed right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's almost worse to hear that. Because in Washington, everybody understands that you can screw up. And in the words of Logan Roy on Succession, when you screw up, there has to be a blood sacrifice, right? That you say, I included a journalist on a, sensitive meeting and, somebody's got to pay. Somebody's got to answer for it. It's worse to say, no, Mike Waltz, you had no chance from the minute you stepped into this building and the knives were out for you and you were not ever going to make it.
That's because he's perceived as being like a neocon or a normie Reagan Bush Republican, something like that, right?
Something like that, right? And his I was reading a description of the deputy that got canned with him, Alex Wong, who basically it said known to be an expert in national security affairs and a moderate Republican. And I thought, well, dead man walking right there.
The death of expertise, right?
Moderate Republican who knows a lot about his subject area. Amazing that he lasted this long. So, this was one of the supposed adults in the room. Rubio was supposed to be the other. Now, the thing with Rubio, of course, people are drawing the parallel to Henry Kissinger, who did this. Kissinger dual-hatted himself, but he did it the other way. He was national security advisor first, and then he pushed the then Secretary of State out of the way and just ate his office and became a cabinet member. The thing people aren't getting about the parallel is Kissinger was able to do this because he was so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Rubio is accumulating all these offices because he is so weak, because they don't matter. This is basically Trump saying, well, we got to have somebody do this. Little Marco, you just take that, just put it on your letterhead. But people know that's not where the decisions are really being made. So,
and he'll do whatever Trump wants.
Yeah, I mean, it just emphasizes your impotence as a member of the cabinet to say, well, yeah, go ahead, be the archivist and sure, be the NSA and be the sex state. None of it matters.
And then Laura Loomer, this, you were hinting at this earlier, but I mean, this is a scalp potentially, right? Laura Loomer's doing a victory lap of taking out Mike Waltz after she's already taken out some other staffers, like in Secretary of State's office and whatnot, right?
Yeah, and I don't understand the relationship there. I mean, normally, kooky right wing, conspiracy theorist influencers don't get to pick the staff in the office of the president. But
is this a Bill Belichick type situation here, Tom?
I'm not going to speculate, Matt. Thank you. But for whatever reason, there is this very bizarre access to the Oval Office. And I think she was going to take a victory lap no matter what. I mean, I'm guessing that Waltz, she didn't actually take out Waltz. I mean, yes, the other people that got fired, these kind of second tier staffers, she had a list, but I think the stories are right. I think there were people in Trump's White House that had it out for Waltz to begin with, and they finally got him. But of course she was going to take a victory lap. This would be like me saying, I wrote a piece a while back saying Pete Hegseth should resign. And if he actually resigns or is fired, that'd be like me saying, well, of course they read my piece and did it. I mean, she's just going to take credit for that. But it tells you how dysfunctional this White House is, that nobody really says, no, that's ridiculous. This is about these were serious people making a serious decision about serious issues. Instead, it's, well, what are you going to do?
And of course, Pete Hegseth, there's no, Waltz might be disciplined because he's the one who messed up from a PR standpoint, including the wrong person on a Signal chat. But, actually the buck should stop with Pete Hegseth and the fact that he was actually endangering national security and trying to avoid laws as they pertain to, documenting conversations in the White House and that sort of thing, the Records Act. But no, there's no fallout when it comes to Pete Hegseth, right? Of course not.
It's amazing what Waltz did. I mean, Waltz screwed up. That just, by any definition of a scandal in Washington, what Waltz did was big. But the far more egregious behavior and multiple screw-ups are clearly Pete Hegseth. I said yesterday, that they fired the wrong guy. I think, this was the Signal thing for Waltz could have been survivable but for these other issues. But Trump just likes Hegseth. And, in Trump, that's how it works in Trump world. You stay if he likes you. Now, I don't think, allergy season has kicked in here in the Northeast.
The pollen where I am is insane.
Yeah, I washed off my windshield the other day, and it was just these kind of rivers of yellow, running off. It's terrible. So forgive me. But I think I don't think Hegseth. I mean, I'd be surprised if Hegseth were still here, by midsummer or Labor Day. I think there needs to be some kind of a decent interval in between firings.
Yes.
But the other thing is Hegseth, to borrow a line from the Avengers, it's in his nature. I mean, there's going to be more screw ups because he doesn't know what he's doing. He is in so far over his head that he can't even see, the top of the waves.
And competence and deference and prudence is seen as weakness. So that incentivizes a shoot from the hip mentality that increases the likelihood he's going to keep messing up. And when you get rewarded for messing up, or at least there's no accountability, why would you tighten up your ship? Why would you become more disciplined? So yeah,
well,
I think
you saw that when he gets off the plane right after signaling, he gets off the plane in Hawaii and he's looking right into the camera. He's almost like trying to will himself into the Oval Office all the way from Honolulu, when the strategy is keep talking and bluster your way through everything. You're going to make more mistakes. No one in this administration, because it's not the Trump way, it's not the MAGA way. No one ever says, hey, this would be a good time to stop talking.
Yeah.
Or to just go to work, or just get some things done and just keep your head down. They never pick that option.
But there's also an audience of one.
Right.
And so as Trump likes to see someone like Hegseth, who looks good on TV and who can lie and attack the media and basically so Hegseth may look like an idiot to everyone else, but as long as Trump sees him as tough and loyal and strong, then he sticks around.
Right. He's got this kind of extension, Teflon by extension, and it doesn't matter. I mean, there are Republicans in the Senate who are plenty mad at Pete Hegseth, but that doesn't matter. Trump doesn't. Trump is now, as so many of us warn, Trump is now unbound. He doesn't have to worry about anything. He's beaten all his court cases. He's captured the Justice Department. He talks about 2028, but he's not. I mean, if that happens, then we are just even more doomed than I thought we were. He just doesn't have to worry about anything, and he can leave Hegseth there, because the point of this administration is not to govern. It's not actually to do things. It's to enjoy the ride and to get revenge on your political enemies.
I may quibble with you there. It's certainly not to pass legislation. That's for sure. The goal is certainly not a legislative agenda. But I do think, and this is a theme that's been emerging on this show with other recent guests, is it's not just Trump, that Stephen Miller and Russ vote,
Yes.
whatever. Those guys do have an agenda, and it does seem to be enacted in many ways.
Point absolutely taken. I'm thinking of Trump and the kind of coterie, the inner circle around Trump. In a way, Miller has just become a power center to himself over, at the NSC now. And Vout is extremely serious. And the fact that he knows what he's doing is reflected in the reality that we're not talking about.
Yeah.
Which I said right from the beginning that he was the person to watch, that the rest of this was going to be a kind of carnival of, battle of the network stars. I've just dated myself with that reference, but bringing in all your favorite TV stars, into a Thunderdome on Pennsylvania Avenue. But the guy who to watch is Vout, who just kind of put his head down and said, no, there are things I really want to do, and we'll finally have the power to do them.
You've been writing about acting under Secretary Darren Beattie over at The Atlantic. Tell us about him and what we need to know.
Well, he's an interesting guy. He was actually pushed out of the Trump White House in 2018. Has a doctorate in philosophy, which is pretty impressive. Wrote a dissertation about Martin Heidegger. So he's a bright guy. Landed a job as a speechwriter and then gave a talk at a confab of white nationalists. Oops. Didn't, 2018 was still a time where you could get fired for stuff like that. And however it was done, he exited the White House. But as we've seen, 2024 was also the year of redemption for all of the, island of misfit toys that were cast off earlier. So he has come back as the acting Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy, which is bad enough. I mean, this is a guy who just 6 months ago said, well, if you want to get anything done, you need competent white men.
Mm. Yeah, I remember that.
I'm not a white nationalist, but, he said some, pretty offensive things. He has now, I shouldn't say now, in March, he initiated this kind of witch hunt where he sent around a document saying, I want everything that you have to this office and within the Office of Public Diplomacy that's all about countering disinformation. And he tells the staff, I want everything you've got on your contacts or emails or anything with the following roughly 60 people and organizations. And it's a pretty broad grab bag of people. It's a dragnet. He's looking, if you've talked to Bill Gates, Bellingcat, the Stanford Internet Observatory, my colleague at the Atlantic, Ann Applebaum. This is basically saying, and that's why I began the article with kind of a fake Soviet directive, because it really comes across as very kind of 60s or 70s, Soviet commissar getting the apparatchiks in line. He also wanted, I'm trying to remember the other thing he asked for here.
Well, while you're remembering, let me say, I think if people go to your Twitter feed, Radio Free Tom, you've tweeted a link that will get you, it's like a gift link that will get you around the paywall. So you could read this piece even if you're not a subscriber to the Atlantic.
If you're on Blue Sky or X, you can just click on my profile, and I've put a gifted link of it there.
Nice of you, Tom.
So basically, he's just leading this witch hunt. The other thing he wanted was he was trying to, again, kind of dragnet any information about the following terms, like Pepe the Frog and Great Replacement Theory. And I mean, just, he's basically trying to root out anybody that was working on right-wing disinformation stuff. And it doesn't really matter now because Rubio closed down the whole office 2 weeks ago. So here we are. But
we could go into, Rubio. I've had this conversation so many times on here, possibly with you, but I was a big Rubio fan in 2016. what a disappointment he has been, and it's amazing.
I thought Rubio in 2016, I was still a Republican. I said, well, maybe this is the center-right kind of younger Reaganism, low taxes, strong national defense, small government. But there's no there. I mean, it was a mistake to attribute those things to Rubio because it's a mistake to attribute any kind of solid principle to.
He gave great speeches. He was young. He could fluent in Spanish. You could imagine that he could have been a really good communicator, and that we could have like a Rubio Haley ticket that could have been very. I would have look if we did that, if we ran Rubio Haley in 2016 and lost to Hillary, I might be like, okay, I guess we got to go with Trump. Nothing we do is going to work. Yeah. But we didn't actually try that. That's what pisses me off. But
Rubio Haley is like a center-right fever dream in its day, and I'm not sure how well that would have gotten off the ground, but I have no doubt that probably would have beaten Hillary Clinton, just because I think Clinton was, I have had this argument for years with my Democratic friends, but I always thought there was a natural ceiling to Hillary Clinton's support, and she was never going to make it through an election. But I thought that Rubio projected that kind of Republican optimism.
Yes,
I guess that attracted me to the party when I was a young man in the 80s, as opposed to the kind of the doomer sort of the Democrats feeling like they were this exhausted, just spent party. And it's to see Rubio now easily adopt the same coloration, of MAGA world, and saying that everything's bad and the conspiracies are real, and
he's exhausted.
It's just
his visage is of a man defeated. Like, he doesn't even look like the same person. Like, the soul has been drained out of him.
No, and if he decides, the day he decides he's had enough of this, and what does he do next? Run for governor, I guess, in Florida or something. Can he recapture that or somehow be that guy again? And it's really hard after seeing him sink into that couch. That was a real moment where in the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky, and Vance and Trump make complete asses of themselves. Just let me just say about that meeting, whether you agree with Trump about Zelensky and Ukraine or not, Zelensky was treated worse than people who are actual enemies of the United States who have visited the White House. We've had terrible human beings visit the White House, and they've been treated with decorum and respect. And instead, you had like these two frat boys starting at 2 a.m., beer-fueled argument about foreign policy. It was really embarrassing.
Yeah, it was horrific.
And Rubio just sat there and just like he tried to do the Homer Simpson into the bushes meme, right? Like, if he could have sank further into the couch, he would have.
Well, since you referenced Zelensky, where are we going with Ukraine right now? How are you feeling about that? What do you think is playing out?
I think this is where my defensive experts gene screams in frustration when Trump says, boy, ending this war is going to be harder than I thought. Now, no kidding.
Well, I thought he could do it on day one, right?
Oh, no. Remember, he said, even before I take office,
that's true.
I'm going to, manage to extinguish this thing. But I think unless there is this perverse moment where the administration actually gets mad enough at Putin to give more weapons to Ukraine, which I don't think is going to happen, all you can do is pray and hope the Europeans can fill some of that vacuum. But there's two things about Ukraine. One is that any ceasefire is probably not going to be worthy of the name, because Putin regards ceasefires as merely tactical pauses before he catches his breath and starts again. But the other is, no matter how this comes out, the damage to American leadership in the world, to America's role in the world, is thoroughgoing and deep, and probably not something that any other president is going to be able to fix for some years to come. I mean, Trump, in 90 days, Trump has undone 80 years of of the efforts of good and competent and well-intentioned people for almost a century to keep America safe, to keep the rest of the world free. And Trump's managed to kind of piss it away in 3 months.
And that's just the post-World War II alliance, world order, whatever we want to call it. The economy is something else that he has pissed away in the first 100 days. And he's talking now, he's saying, hey, at Christmas, instead of getting $20, maybe you just get 2 fewer Christmas presents. He is now calling it Joe Biden's stock market, right? It's not, this is no longer Trump's economy. We're now back to it being Joe Biden's stock market. What did you make of that, Tom Nichols?
Well, that's classic Trump. Always deflect and evade responsibility. That if things go well, it'll be Trump's economy again, and then if there's a drop, it'll go back to being Joe Biden's economy. Basically, that's just how it's going to be forever as long as he's in office. I mean, we could be here 4 years from now, 3.5 years from now, the economy could be in shambles, and Trump's going to be saying, "Well, after Joe Biden, what are you going to do?" But there's a couple of things about, we were talking earlier, Matt, saying he's not really interested in governing, but he is interested in proving that he was right all along on certain things, right? I mean, he's had a pebble in his shoe about tariffs because the last time around, they told him, don't, the adults, don't do this. You can't, I've got people screaming at me on the phone. Can't happen. So he didn't do it. In a way, I suppose you could call this governing, but it's really just sort of nursing a narcissistic injury. He wants to prove that tariffs do the things that he thinks they do, that he's just so wrong about. But he's going to do this in the belief that he has to be proven right. But the other thing is, when he talks about, well, $2 and who needs all these toys and doesn't have to be that cheap, he sounds like Bernie Sanders. I mean, who would have thought that a Republican, at least you and I both know Trump is not a Republican in any way that is recognizable. Anybody that was a member of this party, until about 10 years ago. So, but yet to see the entire Republican Party going along with the President of the United States saying, I'm here to tell you that you don't need certain things in the free market. Yeah. And it's up to me to decide what you'll pay and how much of a product you can have. Well, Soviet central planner.
Exactly. That goes to the Atlantic interview with Trump, with some of your colleagues, where he said, this is like a department store. I set the price. So it is, Tom, you are not exaggerating. He is espousing a worldview that is a command and control worldview that then basically condemns capitalist materialism and consumerism, which is an interesting place for a Republican debate.
It says that the White House should basically be like Gosplan. Yeah. Like it should be like the Soviet Central Pricing Institution, because only he can decide how many dolls you should have at Christmas. Now, the thing is, of course, because his cabinet is a bunch of gazillionaires, sure, Howard Lutnick's like, well, my mom's not going to complain and I can buy 1,000 Malibu Stacys for my kids. It doesn't matter to them. But it just astonishes me that Trump, I guess it's always astonished me how much Trump and the people around him hate the working class that are the backbone of their support.
Well, he's saying things that if Mitt Romney said these things, it would be like, this is the least populist thing in the world.
The public is going to rolls and the guillotines,
Yeah. And yet Trump says it and largely gets away with it. I mean, I hope someone is saving some of this footage for a TV ad or something. But
what's interesting is when you talk to a Trump supporter about this and you bring these things up, it's interesting that even when Trump lapses into his word salad, that so many Trump supporters I've talked to, they kind of impatiently wave that away and they say, look, I know what he meant. There's this defense mechanism that says, I know what he meant. And, at least he's doing something. You saw that, I don't know if you saw yesterday, there was a piece in the New York Times where they talked to the Trump voters who are still happy. They went to that 42% who think he's doing a great job. And I posted it on social media, and I said, this is one of the saddest articles you're going to read all day, because it's people that are literally now so detached from reality that Trump could say, I'm going to quarter troops in your home.
Yeah. Well, apparently now they can come into your home if they suspect you to be harboring immigrants or something, right? I mean, without a warrant.
Say, well, I know what he means, and I understand. At least he's doing something, because they are now so far. And I feel like I've said this every 2 years or so, but they are now so far up that tree that they can't climb down. And I think Trump knows it. I mean, he knows he can say things like, "Hey, you know what? Stop your whining, you ungrateful peasants. You'll get $2 and you'll like it." And they go, "Yes, my lord."
I think though, Tom, I've been listening to Ross Douthat talk about Trump's sort of mystical powers. And I'm telling you, man, there's something there. Like, even I, a notorious Trump skeptic, to put it mildly, when I hear him say things like, this is Biden's stock market, I'm even tempted to go along with it until like my judgment kicks in and says that's utter bullshit. He's as weird as he is, as chaotic as he is, there's like a magical pull that he has. He is really good at propaganda, and
he's a salesman. He's a salesman.
He's really good at it.
And he's good at it. I've said all along, I mean, he is probably the least intelligent person ever to occupy the Oval Office, but he has a remarkable kind of lizard brain superpower when it comes to marketing and sales, that he says things with such utter conviction. I mean, he is the walking embodiment of the George Costanza comment that it's not a lie if you believe it. And he believes it. I mean, in the moment that he says anything, he says it with utter conviction and totally believes it. And the problem is that Americans are used to being passive recipients of images and words, that we sit back, in our chairs, and we turn on our TVs, and we're like the remember that old Maxell ad, the guy, the
Max
TV
Headroom,
blowing,
right?
What's that? Yeah, just sit in this chair while it just blows them away. That is how we take in information now. We don't read information, which is, I think, a huge difference in the way Trump operates is if you read what he says. I've had that experience too, where I've just watched him and said, he's good at this. I mean, he's good at, if bullshitting is an art, then he is Michelangelo. I mean, it's just, but because you have to watch the whole package, the voice and the intonations and the hand movements. But if you just take those same speeches and you read them, as you would in a newspaper, you say, this is nuts. This is just pure crankery. And it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, literally, there is no, subject, verb, object construction here. You can't even diagram these sentences. And so I think that's always my caution, is when you take an old Reagan speech or an Obama speech or a Bill Clinton speech. I mean, think of the big communicators that we've had. The speeches on paper hold up. They actually are good. I mean, I was doing some work on the Cold War, and I was rereading one of Reagan's speeches in Europe. And Reagan, because of his occasionally halting delivery, sometimes speeches are even better just reading them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the "Must mankind end in a perish in a hail of fiery atoms" speech, which is really, one of his better.
And he had great speechwriters.
And he had great speechwriters.
And they knew his world. They knew his worldview. They could poetry.
I'm gonna be churlish here and say I wrote a lot of speeches in my day, for a senator, and before that, I wrote a lot of floor statements for a state rep, when I worked in Boston. And Trump has really lousy speechwriters. I mean, they're just terrible. They are cliches.
But Tom, if Peggy Noonan wrote a speech for Trump, he couldn't deliver it.
Well, that's the thing.
And he would.
Part of what I was going to say about why they're bad speechwriters is they try to take Peggy Noonan-ish kind of big thoughts and long strings and stuff them into Trump's mouth. And he just can't do it. I mean, he doesn't, he
Yeah. Or he would undermine it. He would say like,
so true.
He would say like, and touch the face of God. A lot of touching there. God's face.
Yeah, exactly. If he read High Flight, the tumbling along the corridors, and I touch the face of
early bonds of earth.
So true. I mean, the thing about his speeches is he hasn't read them. So when he reads them, he reacts to them in real time.
It's his first
very
time,
obvious. Like they're not his voice. So when he says, and we must, end this American carnage now. So true. Like he's agreeing with whoever wrote that. They're not his words. So, I think he is a creature of television. He is a creature of the electronic image, and he is good at it. But I disagree with you that I don't know how long this can hold up. I mean, when he says this is Joe Biden's economy, maybe there's just a part of me that's just so empirical that I just know that's wrong. It doesn't get through my filter. It's because of I'm the most objective person about Trump. I've been following him for, living through this whole business for almost 10 years now. But there are things that are just so ridiculous that, the stock. I mean, yesterday, 2 days ago, some wag out there on social media literally took the two Trump statements side by side. This is my stock market. This is Joe Biden's stock market.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for that to get through your filter and stick, you've already decided that whatever Trump says is true.
Let me just highly recommend this to the audience. I'm sure you've read this book, Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. But one of the points that Postman makes is that a society that gets its information primarily from the written word is a society that is logical and rational. And that to win an argument in that society, you have to make an argument that is more rational or logical and persuade people via logic. Once the majority of Americans or any society gets its information, say from TV or, God forbid, the internet, now it's more based on like emotion, more susceptible to propaganda. And I think that, this Postman wrote this book in the early 90s. Man, is it prophetic. And I think it really explains how if we were still a society that largely existed where most Americans got their information from reading, Trump could not get away with what he does. It would not work. People would see through it in an instant. But because we're TV and video, it works much better for him.
The other thing about the written word is that it's persistent. I think a big part of what we're seeing with Trump is the ability to recreate reality every day.
Yes.
If you just say it out loud, well, this is my stock market's, 42,000, it's my stock market. Stock market's 37,000, Joe Biden's stock market. But because it all happens in this stream of sensory input, you just kind of swim in it, and whatever the current is that takes you, you go along with it. And I think that's it's a great recommendation. I mean, Postman saw it coming 40 years ago.
I'd say right now, to understand the modern world, that's one of my books I would recommend. I think 1984 Eerily is probably also on that list.
Well, it's a good book called Our Own Worst Enemy by a guy at The Atlantic. It's actually pretty good because I cited Postman, but if people are looking for another classic book that will kind of give them the willies about how this works, the other I'd throw on that pile, Matt, is The True Believer by Eric Hoffer.
Yes.
Where Hoffer points out that when people get bored and they look for crusades, they replace the lost sense of meaning in their life with nutty crusades, which is how I imagine you get the Secretary of Health and Human Services talking about chemtrails.
Yes. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Before I get you out of here, last topic, I think, totally shifting gears, but I just want to, it's on my mind. Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, often mentioned as a possible presidential candidate. We saw the other week there was this photo of her in the Oval Office as Donald Trump is signing executive orders targeting his political enemies. She's got a binder covering her face.
Yeah.
And now, most recently, she appeared on stage with Trump and he praised her. There's videos of them, I don't know, partial hug, handshake, that kind of thing. It's weird. On one hand, it's weird to say that Donald Trump is a fascist authoritarian who's an existential threat, but we're going to appear on stage with him. On the other hand, you could make an argument she's the governor of a state that needs help, and he happens to be the president. And maybe Joe Lieberman and Chris Christie and others, Charlie Crist, I think, maybe it's not fair that we show these videos of them hugging each other. What do you make of this?
I think the White House footage was worse because you do make a point that if the president, I know this sounds like too much about politics in the before times, but if the president of the United States comes to your state, especially a state where a lot of people in your state voted for the guy, I suppose you at least observe a certain amount of decorum and greet him and meet him at your state and shake hands and then leave. Showing up and then getting pulled on stage, I'm tempted to say that's a bad decision or bad staffing or something because Trump does that. And you probably didn't want to be there for that moment. It's different to say, we have governors greet people on tarmacs all the time. And then they can just say, welcome to Michigan, Mr. President. And now I have to go back to work. So I don't know what happened there. I think, fair or unfair, the book in front of her face is going to hurt politically. Yeah, we were just talking about images, right? That image is going to stick. That's a Dukakis in the tank moment.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And it's just, but on the other hand, I'll throw this grenade out there. After two female nominees in a row, both losing, was any female politician really a front runner for the 2028 Democratic nomination? Because I think I know that there are people within the Democratic Party who are concerned about concerned about the fact that there still may be a sexist glass ceiling up there, and that But the other thing that struck me, and I'm sorry to change gears on you, but the other thing that struck me about what Trump does, how, well, I shouldn't say, how. Anyone who's been through a divorce knows that one tactic is you talk to the best divorce lawyer in town because then they can't work for your spouse, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of a way that you can, like in Beverly Hills, apparently it's a thing. Like people with a lot of money get divorced and they just spend the morning talking to the top 6 lawyers so that their husbands can't, right? It's almost like Trump dooms candidates by showing up in their hometown and saying, and bear hugging them and say, hey, good to see you. And then it's like, well, now you're, it's almost like he invalidates Democratic candidates by showing up.
Chris Christie and Obama.
I thought that was deeply unfair to Chris. Well, I'm not a
fair
huge
point
fan
because
of
New Jersey was really struggling at that point.
Right.
But
and Christie did a very human, normal thing. With a very normal president, he was like, thank you for coming to my ravaged state. I appreciate that you're here. We will, in a spirit of bipartisanship, work together. That's different than, as you just pointed out, saying Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. And boy, am I glad he's here in Michigan. It's different. It's just different. And I've always thought that, Governor Christie, he's an interesting guy. He throws hard punches. He's can be really obnoxious, made a mistake supporting Trump, all of that. But to pin that moment on him, I always thought was, I actually admired both of Obama and Christie for that moment, if that makes any sense, because that's exactly when you've had a natural disaster that is making the people of your state, put them into misery. You want to see your governor and your president, clasping each other's arms and saying, we're going to get this fixed. And I think it was the beginning. It really showed you how this kind of irrational hyperpartisanship was already getting out of control at a time like that. So there's my ringing defense of poor Chris Christie during the hurricane.
All right. Tom Nichols, always a pleasure. Any final thoughts or plugs?
No. It's amazing how many things, just before we came on, talking about the number of things that we can't keep up with. That we thought we could talk about today. And there's just this huge, list of things.
I got a stack here. We didn't get to half of them.
It's absolutely nuts. I mean, when I wrote the Darren Beattie thing yesterday, I had 2 other articles in the hopper that I just had to kind of push aside and say, got to do this. So my recommendation is everybody should get away this weekend and go out and touch grass, because you're not going to keep up with it. Everything will still be there next week. So it's going to be a beautiful weekend. Get out there and
I literally
for a few days.
I took the afternoon off yesterday. And normally I'm multitasking. Like if I'm working out or jogging or walking or whatever, I'm also listening to political podcasts. I'm listening to The Bulwark, The Remnant, whatever, The Daily. Yesterday, I'm like, no, I'm just going to listen to some Kenny Chesney and some Jason Mraz and like pretend I'm at the beach. And dude, I needed it, man. My soul needed it, that break from politics. So listen to all of my podcasts by all means, but then for the rest of the weekend, touch grass, get some sunshine. Tom Nichols, thanks for coming back, man.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Good to see you.